Okay. That's actually kind of what our lesson's going to be tonight. Uh, as many things like that are out there, and it hadn't been that long ago, probably everybody in here supposedly got a text from me, right? That I needed some gift cards. I was in a meeting, couldn't do it, but I knew some people that needed some gift cards and some food, and I started getting texts and phone calls all day long about that. Number one, I'll never text or call for gift cards, so don't ever. Now, if you just want to randomly send me some, that's fine. I don't care, but I won't never ask for any. And I guess somebody got a hold of our directory because I got that in alphabetical order. So, matter of fact, I started playing a game all day on who was going to call me next based on the alphabet. And I was pretty right on most of it. But when it comes to, think about this. There are, and I'm not saying I am, but there are some relatively intelligent people that fall for some pretty dumb things, don't they? When we have all of this out there, a lot of people are getting scammed. It kind of scares me now that all this with AI is taking place, and I don't understand any of that at all. But it's pretty scary to think about what people can do and what people believe. There's, when you think of myths, you think of scams, you think of all of these things. It kind of makes you wonder why people believe those things. Why do you think there are people that believe that? Do you think that somebody got that email and somebody's actually going to send that lady or man, whoever it is, I don't know, $10,000 and hope to get $10 million? Do you think somebody will actually do that? Yeah, I think there would be somebody to do it. There was a lady that was telling me at the funeral home, it's been a little while back, she said she got a phone call and it sounded exactly like her granddaughter saying she was needing help and need her to send her money. And she sent it, but it wasn't her granddaughter. That kind of scares me when things like that could happen, isn't it? But you think of why people believe that. And I think there's a lot of different reasons why people believe scams and myths and things of this nature. You take a myth, for example. Myth is defined as this, as a widely held but false belief or idea. So when you think about it, the key word there would be false. So what some people believe and act upon is something that's false. Then we have to ask ourselves, well, why do we believe it? Well, I think there's a lot of different reasons. Did I turn it off or I never turned it on? How about that? That sound better? I may have turned it off. That could have been my fault. So let's see, it's Wednesday. Yeah, I'm allowed one so far. So I'm doing something wrong. I think one is that some things are pretty easily believed because it appears to be true. Or maybe it's just wishful thinking. Maybe somebody gets that and think, well, I've hit the jackpot. That's $10 million, and it's only going to cost me $10,000 to do it. Then I'm set for life. Maybe we're looking for something. Did it go off again? I didn't touch my pocket that time. We're looking for something that's going to better ourselves, maybe without a whole lot of work, and maybe that's what we're looking for. Or maybe it can be something that is, we believe it because of a cultural bias. Just look on the news. I mean, you watch the news anytime, it's hard to tell what's real and what's not real. And then many times what happens is we believe it because we think everybody else does, and we don't want to look stupid, but we'll believe something stupid because we're afraid we're going to look stupid. And I don't use the word stupid lightly or dumb lightly. I think these things are. I don't think individuals are stupid or dumb, but I do think the reason we may believe something or what we're believing is. So we have to ask ourselves, when it comes to believing something, what do we do to make sure that it's true? What do we do to verify it, to make sure that it's not a scam, that it's not a myth. And there's a lot of things that's happened. I looked up a lot of myths on the internet, and I was going to read a lot of them off, but really no need to, I guess. But it was amazing to me how a story of something will get started, and then it will be believed because many people believe it, so that must make it true. And we look at people and think, well, they may be smarter than me, so if they believe it, it must be true. So I don't need to do the research. They've done the research, so I'll just believe whatever it is that they're giving out. And I think that may be some of the reason why we kind of believe the things in which we believe. Now, when it comes to the spiritual things, though, do you think that there are spiritual scams? Do you think there's religious scams? Just like we, see scams all the time on the internet, do you think there are religious scams that people believe? Yeah, somebody's believing something, isn't they? And they can't all be right. But how does something like that? Now, there are things that, and I think it goes back to, there's things that we don't research or really know for sure that's in the Bible. We just think it is. And if somebody tells us it is, it must be. And some of these things are kind of harmless. Like, for example, God helps those that help themselves. Many people think that's in the Bible. A penny saved is a penny earned, An apple a day keeps the doctor away. There's people that actually think these things are in the Bible. Now, those things aren't necessarily going to be devastating to your faith, but they can get you sidetracked. It can prove a point that we can be easily swayed if we don't do the research, if we don't do the hard work in making sure that these things are so. In John chapter 8, beginning at verse 31, you remember what Jesus said? Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." So Jesus here tells us that the truth is what's going to make us free. And for some reason, human beings have been gullible to some extent and quick to both believe and spread false stories that they've heard from other people. And it's very easy to do, and it's very easy to believe sometimes. And the reason may be, when it comes to even spiritual things, we may have heard it from a friend, we may have heard it from a co-worker, we may have heard it in Bible class, we may even heard it from a sermon that somebody gives. And if we don't look and see if these things are true, we're going to get scammed. And it's going to be more devastating than out $10,000, isn't it? So when you think about all these things that are out there, and you think of all these things, again, how does that happen? I think number one is flawed assumptions. I think a lot of times we assume things. Just like I said, we assume some things are in the Bible when they're really not. And it's kind of mind-boggling, the decisions that people make that I consider far smarter than me, and they're based on incorrect assumptions. They just assume something or rely on information that they know, or maybe that they now know is completely false, but they don't want to change. You look at some of the religious groups that are out there, even some of the cults that go to the extreme to where, we say, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. Well, how does somebody convince someone to drink the Kool-Aid? I mean, how does someone convince someone to do something that devastating that's actually going to take your physical life? How does somebody get talked into something like that? What do you think that those individuals prey upon to get someone to believe that? Emotion? That someone's looking for something to believe in anyway, right? So it might as well be something that I come up with. I mean, why do you think people do that? I've often wondered, how does someone get into a situation to where, and I was thinking about that because I just watched a documentary on Jonestown, but, you see all that devastation and heartbreak by what happened. How does somebody, I know some of that was forced, but some of that was voluntary. They volunteered to do that. How does someone get to that point? We think about it taking a person's life physically, but there can be far more consequences than that, can't there?
I think a lot of times if they're hitting on somebody that has been depressed, emotionally not stable, and they make a promise to them, and they keep thinking, all right, this is going like they said, and the next step is going like they said, and they just get so far in that they don't want to back out.
Yeah.
I mean, for every choice you make, there's a consequence.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're all in before you even know you're in.
Yeah, I think the bias can be so great, whether it's cultural bias or whether it's just that group that we're wanting to fit into or don't want to stand out from. I think that can be so great sometimes it can literally blind us from the truth to where we don't want to see the truth no matter what. We think it's one way because maybe in our minds we think how devastating it will be, one, to admit you're wrong, but two, that what you put all this energy and time in for so long is wrong. And that has to be pretty devastating, but I think a lot of it comes from a false assumption. We assume a certain thing. We assume because someone else is doing it or believes it, then it must be true. And we don't want to question that. Now the warning, I think, again, for us as Christians is that we're not immune to this at all. Because even a highly moral, deeply sincere, smart Christian, I think, has no guarantee of protection from the consequences of a bad decision of believing something that we assumed to be right. It's kind of like if we want to put it in a mathematical equation, we can put, even if I had the wisdom of Solomon plus inaccurate facts or some false assumptions, then that's going to equal a foolish decision, isn't it? Doesn't matter how wise I am. We can be very wise, but sometimes make some pretty dumb decisions because sometimes we let feelings and emotions override what the facts truly are. As Jesus said, if you abide in my word, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So how do I, and I've struggled with this even in preaching, how do you preach against false doctrine? How do you preach against all these denominations out there? Sometimes I think that, I had someone tell me one time that they were going to go to every denomination that they could find, and they're going to go to church there for a while and try to figure that out so they can truly know what the truth is. Do I have to do that to know what the truth is? Do I have to go to every different religion that there is to know what truth is? I think what I have to do, I don't have to know what all the deception is. As long as I know the truth, then I'll be able to recognize deception, right? I don't need to recognize the deception first. How am I going to recognize it if I don't know the truth? So the truth is the main thing. The truth should be the first thing that we're seeking. But I think in doing that, we seek the truth in the wrong places. I think we seek the truth in what somebody else says. I think we seek the truth in what somebody tells us and shows us. And because, we live in a world that just a touch of the button, we think we can get the truth, right? Used to, you had to search it a little harder. But you can pull it up on the internet, you're going to get the truth, because nothing on the internet is false, is it? I mean, anything you look up is going to be true. So whatever it says, the first thing pops up, that's what truth is. And I think that's what some people think. Because I think we've gotten, and I'm going to say it, I think sometimes with technology and other things, you don't have to have technology to believe something false, but I think it's made us lazy to the truth a lot of times. Or it has me. Sometimes I'm like, if I want to know how to do something, YouTube's the first place I go. And sometimes I look at that and I'm like, that don't look right, but he's on YouTube, so it must be. And then I start doing whatever it is. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I need to go down one or two and look again at something. This isn't turning out like I thought it was going to. But it's kind of made me lazy in really trying to find out what the truth is. I had somebody just the other day was cleaning out their library and wanted to know if I wanted some books. and things from the library. And I said, no, I don't even hardly use the ones that I have now, because everything that you need, you can get digitally now. You know, so I don't want to take the time to actually read a book, you know, have to open it up and everything, and, you know, just put your glasses on and see. I can hold the phone out there and make it big enough where I don't need them sometimes. So we've gotten to where we don't, and I'm speaking for myself, we don't put in the effort to, so we can assume that something is true and we start following that. And then before you know it, we're at a place that we wonder how we got there. I know since I've been a minister over the years, I've talked with people that have made some pretty devastating decisions and suffered some pretty devastating consequences because they assumed something that wasn't right. You know, I've had individuals come and talk to me, and they'll say, well, so-and-so over here, you know, this minister told me this, so, you know, what do you think about it? And then I'd show them, I'd always say, it don't matter what I think, let's look at the Bible and see what it says. And we're reading the Bible, and they're like, no, that's not what they're saying. And they'll go, and we can find somebody to give us the answer we want, can't we? We'll keep looking till we find somebody that can do that. And once we do that, we feel good about it. So we said, well, if there's somebody else that believes that, then that must be true. And then we do that, and then we suffer the consequences because of it. Again, I think there are some true spiritual, religious scams out there. And people will scam you for a lot of different reasons. They'll do it for money, even in religion. They'll do it out of ignorance. They'll do it out of pride, out of power. There's a lot of reasons that somebody may even do it by accident. Do you believe that I could stand up here and say something false by accident? Yeah, I can. I've actually done it from the pulpit. I can remember twice specifically, I had to get back up and say, I'm thinking about that. I didn't say that right. That wasn't right. Here's the actual right thing. I've had to do that twice. Not that that's the only time I ever make mistakes, but that's the only time that I knew I actually taught something false that I was aware of from the pulpit. Didn't mean to, but I got carried away in my preaching, and I actually said, I took too far in what I'd said. So it's real easy to follow something that's false when we assume what we're being told or shown is the truth. And if we don't know it from anybody else and not search it ourselves, how are we going to know any different? Look in 1 John 4:1. So what do? Well, it tells us, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. How do we test every spirit? How do we test what we're hearing? How do we test what we see? Before we can do a test, there has to be a standard, doesn't there? There has to be a way in which we say, okay, here is the standard. How does everything else measure up to the standard? It's not about what I think is right. It's not about what I believe is right. It's not how I feel is right. None of that matters when it comes to finding out what the truth is. I'm not doing right because it feels right to me. I'm not doing right because somebody tells me it's right. I'm not doing right because I have this false assumption because I've assumed because so many thinks it's right that makes it right. That's not how I determine what truth is. How I determine what truth is find out what the true standard is and how does everything else measure up to that. So we've got to make sure that we are testing every spirit. We're testing everything. It's not wrong to test it, is it? It's not wrong to ask questions. It's not wrong to verify that it's true or not, is it? You know, we need to verify things. We verify things in a lot of different things, you know. If somebody comes in and tells me something in the funeral home, there's a process that I have to go through to verify some facts for a death certificate. Or, why do you think somebody can't just call up the Herald Citizen and give them an obituary? Did you know you can't do that? Why can't you do that? Why do you think you can't do that? Do you think they've ever printed obituary for somebody who's not dead? Now everyone has to come through a funeral home. I've had families tell me, I know somebody works there. I'm just going to, don't work that way. They won't do it. Unless you owned it, I guess you probably could. But they have to verify that it's actually true, that this is, that someone has passed away. So there are verifications that we have to go through for a lot of things. Why wouldn't we want to verify something that could cost us our soul? We hear something and it sounds good, just like I was reading that email and I was thinking, oh wow, this woman wants to give me $10 million. And then I seen the 10,000, which I didn't believe any of it was true anyway, but seen 10,000 and I thought, well, if this was true, 10,000 ain't that bad for 10 million. I could see how somebody could get there. And you do that enough, somebody's going to do it. Just like the ones who sent out the text that was supposedly for me. I'm sure you do that enough, they're going to get some kind of gift card out of that. Somebody's going to do that because they're thinking, I've got to help somebody that's sick. I've got to do this. So they found that point to where this is how I can convince this person that this is true. And intelligent people can fall for this because maybe it just seems like, hey, does that seem out of ordinary that this is taking place? And if it don't seem that out of ordinary for us, then that's something that sometimes we do. But again, a flawed assumption will lead to wrong decisions. That means those assumptions are false. Again, the opposite of false we know to be true. The Bible teaches truth. Jesus, notice what he said when he prayed to the Father in John 17:17. He said, sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. So how are we sanctified out of the world? What is it that sanctifies us? The truth does. His word. His word's truth. It's the truth that makes it different. So the world believes the lie. We're sanctified out of the world by believing and following the truth. And what is the truth? Jesus identifies it here and says, your word is truth. My word is truth. So we have to make sure we're going to the right source for the truth. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, beginning at verse 16, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped to every good work. Now, you may be saying, well, why are we talking about these myths and scams? I want us to, the next few Wednesday nights, we're going to talk about different subjects to where there's kind of been a myth associated with it, or it's kind of a scam, that it sounds good on the surface spiritually. It sounds like it's a good idea, but it's actually false. And we need to ask ourselves, is this what I'm believing? Is this what I'm falling for? Is this what I'm following? Is this what I'm hinging my eternity on? And we're going to see whether it's true or whether it's false. An example of following the truth and verifying things, look in Acts chapter 17. It says, then the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. When they arrived, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. They were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness and searched the Scripture daily to find out whether these things were so. Therefore many of them believed, and also not a few of the Greeks, prominent women as well as men. And some versions, instead of fair-minded, said they're more noble. So Paul felt like these individuals were more noble because they did what? More fair-minded because they did what? They searched the Scripture based on what Paul was telling them, right? Teaching them. Now think about who Paul was. Paul was an apostle, a missionary that was sent out. He wrote, what, 13 of the 27 books of the New Testament? So you think of who he actually is. Was he offended that they checked out what he was saying? No. Some people will be offended if you do. Some people will be offended. How dare you question me? I'm the minister, or I'm the elder, or I'm a Christian, whatever it is. Don't question me. Just listen to what I say. And they get offended. Paul didn't get offended because they searched the Scripture to see whether what he was saying was true. So got to realize is we've got to put in the work to make sure what we're believing is true. Have you ever questioned what you believe? Have you ever asked someone? Have you ever studied yourself just to see? Or do we believe, we can give the denominations a bad name for, they just believe anything. We could fall into that same category, just believe it because we grew up in it. Is that why we believe what we believe? I grew up in this. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't start going to church till I was 16. But everybody I knew, if they went to church, I knew where they went. So it was kind of the culture was there. So do we believe it just because that's all we know? Or do we believe it because it's the truth? And that's an eye-opening question, I think.
One thing I hear kind of a lot with denominations a lot is, well, my pastor says, or my pastor says. It's really easy in the church to say, well, my preacher says, or my preacher. We say preacher, but
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
It's the same concept.
We say, well, I trust them, and they're bad preachers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Going off with what Titus said, we always have to remember who the arbiter of truth really is, and it's Jesus.
Yeah. And I get that a lot. And I think I've used that a few times too. I can remember studying with a friend of mine in school, and I'd have him by the last period of high school, I'd have him scared to death. I mean, he was going to hell in a handbasket. We've got to do something about it. Then he come to school the next morning because he went over and talked to his preacher. Everything was fine again. Then, back then I was using more of a scare tactic type of thing, I guess. But he was my best friend at that time, so he didn't stay that way. But probably for about a week, our discussions went back and forth. And I'd have him convinced until he talked to his preacher. And then when he talked to his preacher, he wasn't convinced anymore. And I finally asked him, I was like, why do you have to talk to someone? We're reading it straight out of the Bible. So why do you need somebody to tell you something different than what this says? That's what I've never understood is, when somebody really has to. Now, granted, even the Ethiopian eunuch even asked Philip, well, how can I unless somebody explain it to me? There is some discussion that needs to be made, and I think that's another good way to find the truth. Do I have that verse next? I might have that verse next.
I've got Proverbs 27:17.
Yeah, that's not where I want yet. John, let's see. Yeah, Proverbs 27:17. That is what I want next. Yeah. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friends. Sometimes you need a good Bible study with somebody that can challenge you. You need to talk to someone or study someone. We used to get together. Some of us would get together and discuss just different Bible topics, just to be able to talk things. And I'll be honest, sometimes an auditorium class isn't a place to do that. I like having discussions, in Bible class, but sometimes it's hard to in a big group because some people go farther than you're going or assume you're going somewhere you're not, and it's hard to just talk things through. And sometimes you just need to talk things through. I think that's studying the Bible. I think that's what we've started to do on our retreats. We have little workshops and break up in groups, and we have scenarios about things or have subjects that we talk about, and sometimes people have different opinions on them. And we discuss those different opinions, and we talk about that. I think that's how, one, you accomplish things, but two, I think that's how you learn things. That's how I learn better. I learn better by talking it through, because sometimes I need to say it out loud, one, to see maybe how stupid it is, that's what I'm thinking, but sometimes when I say it out loud, then I really hear it, or somebody else hears it, looks at me like, okay, that was really stupid, But sometimes I'm like, okay, there's something here, I'm just not grasping it. I need help to grasp this. And I think that's what Bible study is to be able to study, not just to take what the Bible class teacher is saying and just say okay and agree with it. I don't think that's what we're here for. I think we're here to study the Bible, and we should be able to discuss it. We shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. I was always afraid in Bible class to ask questions because I didn't want to look stupid. People would talk about stuff that they already knew, that they assumed I already knew, but I didn't have a clue. So I just sat there and grinned like I knew exactly, like I was in Algebra 2 and never took arithmetic. And I've been in that situation. I didn't like it. When you're not listening in regular math, you're not going to get it in algebra. So sometimes you need to go back to regular math and be able to get it so you can build upon that. Some people don't start out, as a kid in Bible class hearing about David and Goliath, hearing about Moses, hearing about the flood. Some people don't do that. Some people are hearing it now for the first time. So how do you learn and how do you study? That's why I like separate classes. I like little small classes. I like adult class. I think the more you have for the different needs, the better off you are. I think whatever you can do to learn how you best learn, I think that's what you ought to do. Don't just take someone's word for it, but sometimes we need iron to sharpen iron. Sometimes we need to talk it over with people. Sometimes we need to say it out loud. And then we need to go to the Bible and see if we're trying to prove what we already believe or we're trying to believe what the truth is. And there is a difference. And it's easy to do the other. It's easy to go and prove what you believe. That's what I'm going to try to do on Wednesday night, take some proof texts that people use to prove a false belief when they're taking it right from the text, but they're taking it wrong. And you can see that if you take the whole context. So that's what we've got to be able to do. We've got to be able to know, how do I keep from assuming something? And then also, things can have an appearance of truth. During the gold rush, do you think there's a lot of people found pyrite, fool's gold? It looked like gold. They thought they'd struck it rich. It had all the appearance of what gold was, but guess what? None of the benefits. But it looked like it. There's a lot of things out there spiritually and religiously that look true, has the appearance of truth. Even Satan can be an angel of light. It can look true, but it's not. So how do you know the difference? Well, you've got to know, what that truth is. So we've got to figure out the best ways in which to do that. And everybody don't get it the same way, do they? You probably don't learn like I do. I don't learn just from reading and studying. I've got to read, study, I've got to think about it, I've got to talk about it, I've got to see some application of it. There's a process that my feeble little brain has to go through before it clicks. But it has to go through that for me to get to the truth. It doesn't mean that what I'm reading is not the truth. It's just, am I grasping what that truth is, or am I still fighting it? Because you've heard me say it before, as the Bible says, the truth will set me free, but it'll do a lot of other things too. It'll make you mad, it'll make you sad, it will aggravate you, it'll do everything if you're fighting it. But once you accept it and you follow it, that's when it makes you free. And I think we need things to be able to do that. And here's why. Look at John 8:44. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. That's why we've got to know the truth. He's going to show us, cause us to make some false assumptions. He's going to throw some false appearances out there and make it look all nice and pretty. But it's not the truth because he is going to lie. He's the father of it. So we've got to be able to distinguish that. The only way is to know the truth. You go all the way back to Adam and Eve. He convinced Eve, but did Eve know the truth? She knew what the truth was. She added some to it. She talked about touching it, and God didn't say anything about it. But she added some to it. She got Satan to twist it around. She just didn't want to accept it. So we've got to know how to recognize it and how to accept what that truth is so we don't, for a lot of various reasons, believe that lie that Satan is trying to do. Because look at Proverbs 14 and 12.
Hey, I got a question, if you don't mind. How do we show people the difference between what people believe is their own like subjective truth versus objective truth?
I think I can only say how I try to do it, is when anybody asks me, what do you think, or can you show me this, or what do I think, I take myself completely out of it. And I always say, it doesn't matter what I think, let's see what this is. And read it, but also read the whole context, and let them read it. Always let them read it. And once they read the whole context, then ask them, what does that say? And it's hard to refute what it actually says when you get down, you hold someone's feet to the fire of what it does say. Now, that don't mean they're always going to accept it, but it's pretty hard to sit there and outright deny it. We'll try to talk our way out of it, but if you let someone read it for themselves and see it, don't try to explain it away or overthink it. Just, what does this say? What is the whole context? Who are they talking to? What's going on here? It becomes pretty clear, because the Bible is not in codes to where we're not going to figure it out. There's some deeper truths and meat of the matter that we need to study and work for, but we'll be able to figure out how to save our souls. That I think we'll be able to figure out if we will just accept it. But a lot of times it's just accepting. But here's the problem. Look in Proverbs 14 and 12. There's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the ways of death. It seems right. Has the appearance of right. I'm assuming it's right. Everything looks right about it. It sounds good. Just take some of the things out there today. If I would want something to be true, I think the doctrine of once saved, always saved would be the one I would want. That sounds good, doesn't it? There's some verses that give the appearance that that's true. But what's the reality of that? If there's nothing I can do to lose my salvation, there's nothing I have to do to keep it. Is there? Really think about that. That would be pretty easy. I wouldn't have to do anything else. Then people say, well, you'd want to. Well, that's not the doctrine, though. It's not about whether I want to or not. I either am or I'm not. See, once you get into the meat of things, you start seeing the flaw to things. But on the surface, some of these things look good. They appear good. They sound good to us because we want them to be true. I've believed several things before because I wanted it to be true. And I've had my heart broken. I've got ill. I've got upset about it because it ends up not being true. And we've got to make sure what we're following is the truth. In John 14 and 6, and we'll end with this. Jesus said to him, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. He tells you there where you're going to find the truth. So I want you to be thinking about, before we start this series next week, about just your faith in general. What you believe. And ask yourself, why do you believe it? Look yourself in the mirror. Say it out loud. Why do I believe this? It doesn't mean that what you're believing is wrong, but you need to know why you believe it. And we'll go through and look at some things that appear on the surface to be true, but we'll see where they're just false for many different reasons.